The coaching carousel has now spun yet again for NC State football, and they have chosen to place offensive coordinator Robert Anae on it.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Tuesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, some news that many of us have been waiting for over the last couple months. Offensive coordinator Robert Anae has been relieved of his duties for the NC State Wolfpack. Again, not a surprise. This is an offense that repeatedly could not get out of their own way all season long. We had issues with the personnel, the play calling in itself, not utilizing the right guys at the right time. All of this rolled into one, and a change had to be made. It absolutely had to be made. Anyone that watched NC State football this year, including as recently as ECU Pirate fans could tell, because they mentioned it in our comments, y'all have good players that are not being utilized in the way that they should be. Everyone could see it. When you have a running back like Hollywood Smothers that's not on the field for the entirety of the third quarter when he tore it up in the first half, that is just one small instance of a season-long book of inadequacies. This is a move that had to be made, and it was made. So at the very least, it is progress in a small degree.
Progress in a small degree is an understatement for a multitude of reasons. Grayson, just out of curiosity, right? I'm going to read off some stats to you from the ACC official website for the 2024 season, and this should paint a little bit of a picture as to why this move kind of had to be made. We finished with the 9th most red zone touchdowns in the conference. 9th most, technically tied for 8th most, okay? Now, of the 8 teams that were in front of us, how many do you think had less opportunities to score more touchdowns?
Of the 8 in front of us, less to score more, I'll say like 5.
That is correct. That's the exact number. 5 scored the exact same amount of touchdowns as us or more with less opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that kind of sums up the ballgame here.
Yeah.
How many games did we look at and say repetitively, oh, man, if we could score in the red zone, oh, man, if we could get points in the red zone, oh, man, if we come away from the red zone with points. And this isn't to say that we were like world's worst in terms of red zone scoring, because I've seen the numbers and I've seen that multiple websites have it at like different amounts that are all in generally the same area. But NC State generally ranks somewhere around the 40th or 50th best at scoring in the red zone in the nation. You've got to be better. You've got to punch it home when you are close. Because, again, when you get in these situations and you are not finishing drives, you are leaving the door open for other teams, or you are not gaining the ground that you have earned. You are not gaining the ground that you should be gaining to cut a lead. So, objectively speaking, between that and force feeding KC on a bunch of screens, you kind of had to make this move.
While we're still on the numbers here, I also remember Coach Dorne at ACC Kickoff back in July said that the objective goal for the offense was to average 30 to 31 points. They finished at 28.5. Mission failed. That's just one amongst many, many, many other things that were never accomplished with Robert Anae at the helm. I also remember that when Robert Anae was brought to NC State, the calling card for his hire was that he optimizes the best players, gets them into space, and then allows them to do what they do. Really, outside of Kevin Concepcion at the end of 2023, we never really saw it. And to Robert Anae's credit, he did do a great job of utilizing Casey at the end of 23. And for that reason, along with Peyton Wilson in the defense, we were able to rally that season and finish with a record of 9-3. But this year, the offense just never got off the ground. And you saw it, like we talked about yesterday, as early as game 1. The personnel and the lack of utilizing your best playmakers like Justin Jolie or Hollywood Smothers, the list goes on. It was just a comedy of errors for the entire season. And so, yes, a change absolutely had to be made. When you configure your offense in the way that we did, you go all in on putting together skill player after skill player, running back, quarterback to tie it all together, you can't have the results that you produce. It is unacceptable. And so, yes, for that reason, a move has been made here. It is the correct move going forward because you cannot afford to just run it back. You cannot afford to bring back the same personnel, the same coaching staff, and say, well, we're going to bank on things going better in 2025. That's just not how it's going to work. And especially, I think it also speaks to a shaky ground that Coach Dorne now stands on. I mean, that's the elephant in the room here. So just a very disappointing end to a brief tenure. Never really saw what we thought we'd be getting out of a Robert Anae offense, and here we stand.
You talk about getting your best players the ball in pivotal situations. It was, we were so looking forward to Justin Jolie being utilized more effectively because he's a tight end. Anae was a tight end. Yeah. He's the tight end coach. Dave Dorne was a tight end. You're thinking to yourself like, oh, man, you've got the guy. You've got a guy at the position that all of you all have either played or are now coaching, and it just never materialized. You looked up and you said to yourself, we need more of this guy getting touches, more of that guy getting touches. We saw rotations that were just completely out of whack. It's like, hey, we get having these 9-10 deep receiver rotations against Western Carolina. You're not playing the catamounts anymore.
Yeah.
And yet and still, we saw it later on down the stretch where that hadn't been cleaned up. And I would even be generous and throw that he used Brennan Armstrong's legs to great effect at the end of last year.
Yeah.
But again, I think that he leaned a little bit too much on the quarterback run to the point where he thought, oh, I can do it again with CJ Bailey. And it's like CJ has an entirely different skill set and a miles better deep ball than what we saw from Brennan. And I never really saw that utilized in a meaningful way. So, more power to him. I wish him the best wherever his next stop is. But objectively speaking, you can't bring back some of the things we saw in this season.
Yeah, it just felt like at so many different times. It's like when you're on your computer and you just have like 74 different tabs open. So many, in fact, that you can't focus on the one tab that you're supposed to be looking at.
Right.
Whether that speaks to the personnel on the field, like trying to go heavy earlier in the year, and that completely blew up in our face, or trying to establish the run game or spreading the field with the quarterback, never could figure out what we wanted to be really good at. We were just kind of below average at seemingly everything. And that is a massive problem when you have a kid like Hollywood Smothers or a guy like Justin Jolie. I cannot believe that he was not even targeted for the first 75% of the game on Saturday night. That alone is like a fireable offense. And so, not to beat a dead horse here, but you had to make a move. When you have the players that we have and they show you what they're capable of over the course of the season during many different moments, to be that incompetent in the way that you use them, it's time. You got to do what you got to do from that point on. So, and last thing here on Robert Anae before we move forward, something I find very funny. In fact, I spent a lot of time laughing about this earlier today. The fact that Dave Dorne post-game Saturday night told fans to not place blame on the play caller because it matters when all 11 players on the field are also doing their job. So it's never just one guy, it's everyone's fault. 48 hours later to then fire the very same play caller is objectively hilarious. I posted the video of the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme where it sounds like the circus music. That's kind of what it looks like right now. It also appears that our players were learning about the Robert Anae news over social media. I saw tight end Justin Jolie tweet that was literally how he found out that it broke over the internet. Not a good look for NC State football or Dave Dorne right now. We look like an unserious organization. Compound that with losing to ECU in the Military Bowl and the way this season went. Good Lord. I mean, what are we doing right now? This is a brutal look.
Here's my thing about it. I'm never against hey, a guy's underperforming, we got to get rid of him. I'm never against that. We're in a results-based business. Nobody ever cares about the labor pain. Nobody ever cares about, oh, my starting quarterback got hurt. This happened, that happened. This guy underperformed, that guy underperformed. It's all about the results, okay? I understand that. With that being said, there still needs to be a level of decorum and couth in these things where you shouldn't be letting a guy go without telling the play, hey, this is happening. Just letting y'all know. Hey, this is the direction we're going to go in, just so everybody's clear here. I never want my players to find out about things this big via social media if I have any control of it as a head coach, right? Now, with coach getting a different job and leaving, right? If it was, Tony Gibson decided to leave and he didn't want to tell guys, hey, as the head coach, I can't do anything about that. I had conversations with him and said, if you are leaving, tell me. I was never told, so y'all were never told. I was in the dark as well as y'all were in the dark. That's one thing. It's an entirely different thing to have a situation where you are making the decision. You are the one pulling the trigger and never saying, actually, by the way, this is something that's going to happen, guys. Not a call, not a text, especially not to your main horses. Even if you said, you know what, it's Christmas break right now, guys aren't on campus, I don't have time to sit everybody down and have this conversation. Fine, cool, whatever. But to not even reach out and say, hey, this is happening, this is a terrible look.
I think especially when you prop up culture as one of your main pillars, that's not indicative of a good football culture. It's not.
Yeah.
So that is a brutal look amongst many others.
I agree.
Robert Anae has been relieved of his duties. Coming up next, we're going to get into the countermeasure that was taken. The quarterback coach, Kurt Roper, will level up and be the offensive coordinator. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our Tuesday sponsor is Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It's definitely happened to me, and I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. Rocket Money makes it easy to track all of these down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitoring your spending and helping you lower bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in just one simple place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you're looking to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of over 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 per year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Head on over to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Middle portion of our Tuesday show, now talking about the countermeasure of Robert Anae being released. Our quarterback coach, Kurt Roper, will level up and take over the offensive coordinator duties. My first initial thoughts here was, one, this seems to be a move just to make a move because you had to make one. We talked about that a couple minutes ago. You had to let go of Robert Anae. And I think the second part of this is circled around the retention and the continuity between your quarterback and your young skill players. Kurt Roper does make sense from that front because he and CJ Bailey have a very good relationship. Obviously, they just spent the whole year working together as Roper's the quarterback coach. But to do this now, I think is very concerning because if you're Coach Dorne or the rest of the staff, if you had any inkling of an idea that this would be done, why was it not done after the regular season ended to give Roper the reins for all the bowl practices and the bowl? That is not making a whole lot of sense to me right now. If you knew Robert Anae was the problem, and you certainly didn't just learn of this on Saturday night against ECU, why was that move not made then instead of now? It's just another mark of, it feels very unserious to me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'll tell you this much. In terms of the timing of it, I don't think the timing was great. And I would disagree that this is the feeling of making a move to make a move. I think this was making a move after an embarrassment, right?
Well, that too.
We all know that one friend that you can't have in every situation. You know what I'm saying? That one friend that like you take him to a gala or something like that, and he's like dipping the shrimp in the champagne, like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great.
I think the best part of that is everyone instantly thought of that one friend. I know.
You know that friend, right? You know that friend that's a little too hossidity. You take them to the cookout and they're like, why are we eating off paper plates? Where are the crystal plates? And you're like, oh my God. That is in essence what happens when you lose to ECU on a national stage. That's what this was. You were embarrassed in front of the nation. And with that being said, something had to happen. And Dorne had to say, hey, you my mans. I love you, baby boy. I can't bring you back. Not after the way that you embarrassed me in front of everybody else. I just simply can't do it. And so I look at this situation. I say, hey, Dorne did what he had to do here. But like you said, if you're looking at this purely from a standpoint of timing, and if you knew about this beforehand, it doesn't make sense. But when you start to rationalize and understand, this move probably was not being made without a showing of being shut out in the first quarter, 7 points in the first half against a group of 5 team. At that point, yeah, something got to. And I believe that we only scored, 21 points, was it, against a group of 5 team? Come on, dog. Come on. We can never let you slide with that. Again, this was an embarrassment on a national stage, and that guy, that the dress code was formal, and he wore a bolo tie. You can't invite him back.
Yeah, this feels more reactionary than proactionary. I don't think that's a word, but you get what I'm saying here. It feels like you're making a move after the fact instead of getting ahead of the curve and trying to attack it from that angle. Now, like I was saying, I think continuity here is the play because you want to try and keep the band together as best you can. When you lose a coordinator job, it's not uncommon that a lot of players will either follow that coordinator or get themselves in the portal and look elsewhere. So I think staying internal and the speed at which this is being done, it's an effort to try and keep guys like CJ Bailey and all the talented wide receivers and running backs. You want to keep them all here and continue to build. The decision itself to name Kurt Roper as the offensive coordinator, if you separate what I just said into what I'm about to say, it's a little bit perplexing. Now, Kurt Roper has been the quarterback coach at NC State since 2019. He's also done some dabbling in the running back room as well. So he certainly has familiarity within the program, familiarity with a lot of the players. He has some familiarity with this type of position as well. His most recent offensive coordinator stint was with South Carolina in 2016 and 2017, and he's spent years at other stops like Florida and Duke, Tennessee, Kentucky, most of which handling the quarterback coaching responsibilities. So I will say this, though. He has kind of produced some mediocre results. I know he has coached in the past names like Eli Manning, Thad Lewis at Duke. He has a relatively good resume, but this is a little bit concerning to me in the fact that he's not been a play caller in nearly 8 years. This is a large step to reach back into. Not saying he doesn't have an experience doing it, but I think it also connects the idea that Dorne had to make a move quick. You had to do it to retain your guys, and this is probably the best option you really had at that point in time. So I think it makes sense on a general level, but I'm not going to lie to you, Kenton. I am a bit skeptical.
I mean, to say that a lot of people are saying, hey, this was pretty much the only hire that you could make. And, this hire makes a lot of sense, all that good stuff. I'm going to tell you this. I'm against grading hires the same way before we have a game coached by them, the same way I'm against preseason rankings. At the end of the day, is Roper going to be a great coach? Is he going to be a terrible coach? We don't know. Yeah. We don't know. If you say, well, his last stops, he hasn't done much, or it's not indicative, or it's been too long, and I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, this is going to be a terrible hire, this is going to be a great hire, because again, we looked at Anae and thought, hey, this is a great hire.
Yeah,
this is a slam dunk. There's nothing you can do here. So I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, my expectations are through the roof now for this offense next year. They're not. They're not. I could see this offense performing at a higher clip than they did this year. I can see them coming back and running very similarly to what we saw this year if there's another refusal to outright use your best players and kind of go with this mentality of, oh, we invested in the portal, so we got to go with you even if you're underperforming. Listen, the sunken cost fallacy has hurt all of us, okay? When you have taken that pretty girl out on a couple of dates and you realize she ain't rocking with you, why would you keep pouring money in?
Yeah.
Cut your losses and move on. But, I look at this and I say, hey, Roper, more power to you. I hope you do great. Again, rooting for everybody in the red and white, rooting for Roper, hoping he does great. And, the thought that this is indicative of the fact that Dave is on shaky ground, I would absolutely agree. I would absolutely agree that this is a move that shows, hey, the apple cart is starting to get a little upset here. You're losing some of that goodwill that you gained the year before because coaching is a lot like what Andre 3000 said. You're only funky as your last cut. And the reality is this last cut stunk. I got to bring out the Febreze based on what I saw out of this last cut from NC State. A losing season after everybody predicted you to be one of the dark horses in the conference. It stunk. So objectively speaking, Dave has to do something, and Kurt Roper has to be a major part of that going into next year.
You ever had a first cut so bad that you had to go get a second cut? That's what this is. And I'm speaking from experience. It's happened to me far too many times. Why can't we find good barbers anymore? Okay, anyway. No, for me, I'm tending to put a lot more faith in the talent of the players than I have in whoever's calling the plays, because what we saw from CJ Bailey has projectable growth. What we saw from Hollywood Smothers has projectable growth. Noah Rogers, Justin Jolie, fill in the blank. There is a lot of talent on this team. And when you factor in some of the incompetencies of the play calling that we saw this year in terms of, QB draws on 3rd and 6 or 4th and 1, you're running out of the shotgun, trying to do a heavy formation, blows up in your face, not utilizing the best players on the field that you have for the entirety of the season. When you're bringing in a new guy, whether it's externally or internally, your main point is, hey, you saw what that guy did? Don't do that. Do a better job of putting the ball in the hands of Justin Jolie or Smothers, XYZ. So I don't think offensively much will really change, so to speak. Like, my expectations don't really go anywhere because I don't think it's like a super great hire, and I'm expecting to score 40 points a game, but I'm not expecting to be really any worse than we were this year because, again, it's all the same talent, and all you have to do is just utilize it to a higher degree. So I don't know where I really stand on this, but nonetheless, I understand making this move and handing it over to Roper because, like you talked about with Dorne on shaky ground, I think being that there's so much conversation about Dorne's buyout and such a disappointing year here at 6-7, you're in year 12 of the tenure and you're, repeatedly spinning your tires in the mud, the program is stalling out. It's much easier to make a move like this one instead of look externally and find somebody that wants to buy into your program, knowing that, hey, if things go south again in 2025, pretty good chance that the whole thing gets blown up. And I mean like all of it. So I certainly think that this move does make sense on that level. And that is why they're going with Kurt Roper ahead of anyone else that they can find from another school. So it is what it is at this point. We're just going to have to wait and see with bated breath if the offense can take some kind of step forward from what we saw this year. Too many instances of incompetence and leaving points on the board, leaving your best players off of the field. Could not have that or take that for any longer. And so this move has now been made. Quarterback coach Kurt Roper will take over the offensive coordinating job at NC State, the second of 2 big moves announced on Monday. We'll see where this leads us into our next conversation involving the defensive coordinator. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple of minutes of our Tuesday show. We spent a whole lot of time talking about coordinators. Might as well finish the conversation talking about the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, on Saturday night, the interim defensive coordinator, Freddie Autry-Lindsey, didn't have the greatest of audition tapes as ECU got virtually whatever they wanted on the ground. And also, the concept of putting a spy on the field for a mobile quarterback was still not realized, even after all of the issues we had with this during the regular season. So, Kenton, with NC State making moves on the offensive coordinator side of the ball, do you expect the defensive coordinator to change here anytime soon, or do you think they're going to roll the dice with FAL?
I mean this from a very genuine place. I'm sure Freddie is a great guy. I'm sure he's a good man. Sure he's all the things. If they choose to roll with him, I'm going to support him all the way. I would not be upset at all going elsewhere. I would not be upset at all going elsewhere. I'm not even a 3-3-5 hater. I'm not even one of those people that's like, oh, you don't see any top teams running that. It is what it is. However, in terms of the top coordinators, how many of those guys run a 3-3-5? Like, forget the team. Forget the squad that's good this year. Coordinators that have success over long periods of time, how many of them run 3-3-5?
Not many.
Coach Gibson was extremely unique in that way.
Yeah.
And also, there are multiple up-and-comers that I think could be or have been Wolfpack lifers that are too close to not run. Everybody keeps mentioning Clayton White as a guy. But you know who works under Clayton White right now? Who was on the coaching staff when I was there as a GA? Sterling Lucas. He's done great things everywhere he's been. Every single defense that Sterling Lucas has coached on has been good to great. And granted, he normally either coaches a position or was, like I said, a GA or something along those lines. I wouldn't have a problem with seeing a guy that was really damn good for the Wolfpack come back and do things and see what he could get done at this level. And granted, I understand people who would say, no, I don't want a young guy. I don't want a guy that's got less than 10 years of total coaching experience or whatever at the college level. I get that. But it's not that I'm against the 3-3-5 as a scheme. I'm just saying, show me the coordinators who've done it at a high level. And if you can secure you one of those guys, then by all means, get one. But the only one that I can think of that has been good with the 3-3-5 just departed from us to go to Marshall. So that's my take there.
It's an interesting conversation because of all the logic we just applied on the offensive side of the ball. And I think handing the coordinating duties over to Kurt Roper makes a lot of sense from a continuity standpoint. So you would think it would also make sense for FAL, but man, things were no bueno on Saturday night. I already told you like 13 times that ECU rushed for 326 yards. I don't know if I'm ever going to get that out of my brain. How disgusting that is. I want to also circle back to the concept of the quarterback spy, and that was the massive factor of why we lost that Georgia Tech game at the end, and even the Wake Forest game way back in October. The refusal to do something so simple as saying, hey, your job is to watch the quarterback. He move, you move. Do not let him get the first down. How that was never employed at such crucial parts of these games where we have a short lead or maybe we're chasing some points, and then it ends up blowing up in our face. For that concept to carry over from Coach Gibson to Coach FAL, big problem, big problem, big problem. And if you take all of these same concepts, like we talked about in the offense, and just kind of hope and pray that it goes better for you in 2025, I got news for you. That's probably going to be a long shot. We talked about the personnel on the defensive side of the ball and how the linebacking play was just extremely lackluster this year. Just what it is. When you run the 3-3-5, it's so heavily dependent on nearly elite linebacking play. And you got that from guys like Peyton Wilson and Drake Thomas and Isaiah Moore. Outside of those 3 or 4, it's been kind of a rough showing here of late. So do you go away from the 3-3-5? Can FAL do that if you decide to retain him? Or do you look elsewhere? You're probably going to have to do that in a very short amount of time because, again, it all circles back to retention. You have all of these defensive players re-signed to come back in 2025. If you pull plug on FAL now, what does that look like? Do you have a bunch of players into the portal when the springtime comes around? There's a whole lot of movement here going on, but I don't know, man. I just got to be honest. I don't have a ton of confidence based on what I saw on Saturday.
I'm worried about persistent problems that existed under Coach Gibson in this final season that I feel like could carry over if you keep FAL. But on the flip side of that, there is always, hey, better to keep the devil you know. You know what I mean? Some people look at it that way. So I understand both sides of this, and however this hire shakes out, I'm going to look at that hire the same way that I am this offensive coordinator. If we rock out with FAL, I'm not going to judge you off top. I'm not going to judge you and say it's a terrible hire back. If we decide to go elsewhere. By the way, we decide to go Sterling Lucas. I'm not saying that I got my Nostradamus on, but maybe. But in all seriousness, whichever way this hire goes, I'm not really in the business of saying, oh, this is a great hire, this is a terrible hire, until we see what happens. Because how many times have we been duped and thought, oh, that's a great hire, that's a slam dunk, that's a terrible hire. When the Lions hired Dan Campbell, I was crying, shaking, and throwing up, saying this kneecap guy is who we're gonna rest our laurels on. And lo and behold, I was wrong there. When Anae got hired, I said, oh man, I'm salivating just thinking about how he's gonna cook up. That man didn't use salt or pepper. I don't know what he was in there cooking, but no Saison, no Lawry's, no nothing. No, not an ounce of no seasoning on that thing. So, I walk away from the offensive coordinator hire and I look at this defensive coordinator search and I say, whoever they hire, I don't care. How the hiring happens, I don't care. The only thing that matters is the alphabet. W or L. Which one are you walking away with more often than not? You know, there is nothing that covers over a multitude of sins like winning. And if we win next season, if we take care of business next season, I still got bozos from East Carolina mentioning me right now on Twitter. You understand? If we are winning, hey, I'm going to shut up. I got nothing to say about a winner, but keep it up. But if we are losing, that's where, you know, we'll look back at these hires and say, these are the two that got Dave Cann.
A lot of complicated conversations surrounding the coaching staff this time of year. When it feels like you're nearing the end of the rope of a tenure, this looks like it may be like one of the final stands here. When you're leveling up Kurt Roper or potentially keeping FAL on the defensive side of the ball, this looks like now or never. The silver lining is that you have a lot of the same retaining talent to grow from one year to the next, but if you don't have the right guy in position to lead those people in the right position, you end up with seasons like this one. But that'll do it for us here on Tuesday. Make sure to flood the comments with all of your thoughts on the firing of Anae, the hiring of Roper, and the still, I guess, question mark up in the air surrounding the defensive coordinating job at NC State. Be sure to hit that like button, drop all of your comments in the comment box, mash that subscribe button if you have not already. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for more on Wednesday. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.